Next game I want to talk about, Total War Warhammer 40,000. Takes something special and surprising to stand out at the Game Awards, Alex, and you were indeed surprised.
Yes, you may be hearing the sound of Warhammers in the distance here. They are working on my roof, everyone. I'm sorry if you hear that. But yes, the reason why this surprised me, and let's hope my voice carries through the Warhammer sounds in the background, is so the Total War series has done historical, also some fantastical settings thanks to Warhammer Fantasy. It lends itself very well to that because there's a smaller scope. It takes place on one world, maybe one continent, maybe one country. Bringing that into the Warhammer 40K universe is very hard because it is very large and the factions are extremely different. Like in I would say in normal historical games, human foot soldiers are pretty similar across all these like different dynasties and time periods. But in Warhammer, you've got like 3-meter tall genetic mutant humans versus little tiny runty orcs at some point, like with Gretchen. Like, so how do you balance this? And I thought that was very interesting. And unfortunately, we see this trailer. It's a surprise because I don't think a lot of people in the community who follow these games would actually expect them to be making a game. It was like long rumored, but, it was a question of whether or not they're the right person for the IP, given what they've worked on, as well as the fact that there is right now another Warhammer RTS that is going to be huge in development. Dawn of War 4. Why have two RTSs at the same time? And unfortunately, like I was saying, coming from the trailer, for the first incredible amount of the trailer, you almost get no sense of what the game is going to be, other than the fact that they're announcing a Total War Warhammer 40K game. Missed opportunity, by the way. They're not calling it Total Warhammer 40K. And then you get to the end of the trailer, and they hear, from what has been said, based upon, I think, Medieval 3 is the other game they're working on, Total War Medieval 3, I think, unless I'm mistaken about the title there. They are working on a new engine. They kind of, at one point in time when DX11 came about, they debuted a new engine and they've been iterating on it since then, but it has become kind of dinosaur-like in some aspects. And here, they are debuting their new engine with this title, as well as the other one they're currently working on. And it already looks a lot better in terms of, I would say, distant detail of enemy units. That's one thing that these games kind of always suffered a bit, is like how much degradation occurs at a distance. I think they look a lot better here. There's a lot more particles and stuff going on than your typical Total War game, which are usually actually kind of lacking in particles for a lot of stuff, because they're not these large sci-fi universe things. And they're also touting here the fact that this is going to be a multi-platform title, which, as a PC user, I guess it excites me because I would like to see more people being able to play these games. That's not a problem. But when RTS games sometimes come to console, it is sometimes to the detriment of the PC user interface. If they don't have a switching interface, like what you really need is a interface that changes completely when you pick up one of these guys, and if it doesn't do that, then there's a problem. Thankfully, at the end of the trailer, though, they are only showing replay footage, and you can see that because in the top left corner there's a pause and a play button, which is really wonderful. I like that they kept that. They do show the UI though, and it is actually rather minimalistic, sticking to the edges, transparent elements. But you get to see a lot of stuff like individual unit cards are brought out differently than your typical than your Total War games, very differently actually. And the map is also very different, with like there's unit facing on the map. The colors too imply that Space Marines are together with Imperial Guard, which I think is very interesting. I don't know if they're both player controlled or not. But there's as a Warhammer nerd, this hit a lot of points just for even the little bits we saw at the end, and then they pull out the planet side, and you actually see that hopefully the strategic map is much like we see there, where there's like a planet and you have different like areas that you'd kind of take over and control and get tithes from and whatnot. But a lot of question marks, but this is, for me, as someone who likes Warhammer 40K and really loves the Total War series, this seems like a really wonderful idea to finally be coming out. I just hope they don't mess it up by doing some bad UX decisions on PC.
Right. Okay. Well, I've just run the numbers, Alex, and I can exclusively reveal that in a 2-minute 49 trailer, you're getting 29 or 30 seconds worth of gameplay.
Yes.
It's the future. I mean, this is apparently how we have to package top-end RTS video games in order to get an audience at the TGAs. This is kind of a bit nuts, right, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I do think this trailer looks good, and I'm glad there's at least some gameplay. But I do feel like, in this case, the juxtaposition of that gameplay and that cinematic footage maybe isn't as flattering to the gameplay as much, because obviously you have an RTS that's designed for extreme scale at this God's eye view, and then maybe you have an engine they put some assets into and hired Blur, to work in UE5 or Blender or whatever, right? And then that does not make the gameplay look nearly as flattering here. But I'm mostly interested in this from the perspective of a console player, because it is coming to PS5 and Series X. I have played some RTSs on console. Back in the day, I played The Lord of the Rings, The Battle for Middle-earth 2 on Xbox 360, which was actually quite a good time. Had a very good interface, and I played Halo Wars 1 and 2 as well. Now, those were very controller-adapted games, I would say, especially the Halo Wars games. They had slowed down gameplay. The Halo Wars games in particular had simplified base building, which I think was a necessary concession to get them working properly on a gamepad. So I don't know if that would be the case here. Obviously, I don't think that would be to Alex's liking, but at the same time, I mean, it's very hard to manage large swarms of units, things like this. That gets very complicated on a control pad. So I hope that's not the case here as much. But hopefully it should have reasonable performance too, because those consoles and 2 CPUs, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they necessarily fare with like really, really gigantic swarms of enemies and foes and things like that. But yeah, I'm excited for the console angle in this game. That's my kind of point of interest.